EA Sports. It's in the game.
EA's ethos of releasing a new Madden entry every single year has become a tremendous detriment to the game as a whole. Modern games have become very large, very complicated, and very expensive to create, and every game series that has relied on an annual release cycle has, in my opinion, suffered for it. Even companies like Ubisoft have recognized this, which is why that company has decided to end its cycle of annual Assassin's Creed releases, opting instead for a major release every 2 or 3 years, with some large-scale DLC and expansions to fill out the intervening period. Despite reusing the same game engines, the huge cost of creating a new game every year stretches the company's resources further than they can go. Though I still don't think that Assassin's Creed Origin was particularly great, see the full review on my blog, the game still clearly benefited from the extra design and development time that the year's hiatus provided, and the general internet consensus is that the game turned out pretty good. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was released only a year after Origins, and it looks like a terrible, derivative waste of time fueled by a grindy microtransaction economy pulled straight out of a mobile free-to-play game, except that it has a $60 upfront price tag. We'll have to wait and see if Ubisoft follows through on its promise to spend more time making fewer, better games, or if it decides to go back to milking its franchises with slapped-together annual releases until nobody wants to play them anymore. EA's Madden game is in an even worse boat than Assassin's Creed was in. Not only is Madden an annual release, but its internal resources are being stretched out between multiple, completely divergent game modes. EA has to choose how much resources to devote to each of these modes, and that commitment comes at the expense of the other modes. In addition to having to make general gameplay improvements every year, the team is also tasked with coming up with new features and improvements for Franchise Mode, Ultimate Team, and now Longshot. They're basically developing 3 different games and trying to squeeze them all into a single annual release cycle. To make matters worse, one of these game modes clearly makes a lot more money than the others. As such, Ultimate Team has become the design focus of the game every year. It's where we see the most improvement and the most new features and ideas. Sadly, this mode does not attempt to provide a fulfilling and interesting football or team-building experience, at least not as far as I'm concerned. It's designed to sell packs of cards. These ideas are squandered on a game mode based around a pay-to-win model of addictive gambling-like behavior, the same design that got EA in trouble for implementing it in Star Wars Battlefront 2, but which consumers seem to give them a free pass regarding the sports games that have been doing it for years. EA could probably just make Ultimate Team be its own standalone live service. It could even be offered as a free-to-play, or as people like Jim Sterling like to call it, fee-to-pay game. But they don't. In addition to the hundreds of millions being raked in from the microtransaction sales alone, EA also wants Ultimate Team players to have to shell out the $60 entry fee every single year. Why not just make it a standalone subscription service then? Separating Ultimate Team from the core Madden package would, hopefully, allow the Madden developers more resource and leeway to implement a better core Madden experience for those of us who exclusively play franchise mode. I'm imagining a Madden release model in which Ultimate Team is a standalone, free-to-play, live service that uses the same engine as Madden for the on-field gameplay, and which is updated each year with new gameplay features and enhancements for free. It wouldn't actually be free, it would be funded by the hundreds of millions of dollars that EA makes from microtransactions. Madden, then, could be an annual or biannual or triannual or whatever release that sells for $30 or $40 and includes Play Now, online head-to-head, and franchise game modes. Longshot could even be included as well, or it could be sold as a standalone $10 or $15 game, or as a DLC pack for Madden. I personally wouldn't mind if that was the release model that EA went with. MUT could then be used as a platform and testbed for introducing new gameplay upgrades over the course of the year. This would serve as a sort of playtest for those new upgrades, and it would hopefully encourage player retention during the NFL offseason, as the game would be regularly updated over the course of the entire year. This might make good business sense for EA, since consumer retention during the 6 months of the year in which we don't have football going on would certainly increase the sale of card packs. And I don't know about you, but I'm typically not playing Madden after the NFL season's over. The problem isn't simply that EA is prioritizing MUT over other game modes. The problem is that EA can't even really decide how and if they want to continue to support franchise mode at all. Despite all the talk of 3- and 5-year plans for the game, EA keeps hiring and firing new people with new creative visions to lead the development. Or if the leads aren't being fired by EA, then they are being pressured to resign, probably as a result of having to continually conflict with EA's corporate mandates. As such, the Madden product has been very stagnant for a very long time. The game's developer, Tiburon, doesn't have the time and isn't given the resources to fix or resolve outstanding legacy issues with the series. At the same time, the need to sell a new game every year pressures the team into introducing a handful of new features each year, so that they can plaster marketing blurbs onto the back of the boxes to sell product. It's unlikely that an average consumer would pick up a Madden box that says, quote, "the same game as last year, but we fixed some stuff that wasn't working," unquote, and feel compelled to buy it. Instead, the company has to pretend that they are adding new, quote, "revolutionary," unquote, new features every year. The reality, however, is that they never have the time to actually develop a completely new and revolutionary feature, because revolutionizing the game would require dramatic rebuilds of various features from the ground up and would take a lot more than just a year. The end result is that new features get added to the game, but the developers don't have the time or the willingness to rebuild or rebalance the existing systems, mechanics, and features around those new features. This leaves some old features feeling very vestigial and orphaned, as old features that never quite worked properly, or which lacked polish, hang around for years without Tiburon fixing or polishing them. Eventually, some of these vestigial features get amputated. Other times, they languish and fester indefinitely. Perhaps the single biggest legacy problem that exists in modern Madden is the proliferation of motion shifting, warping, force fields, phasing, and clipping issues. These are terms that will come up very often whenever you read or listen to anything that is critical of Madden over the past 10 years or so. If you're not familiar with these terms, here's what they usually mean, though any given writer, streamer, or YouTuber may use them in different contexts. Motion and shifting are actually terms used in real football to denote an offensive player who moves, usually laterally across the formation, in the offensive backfield prior to the snap of the ball. But this isn't what motion shifting refers to in the context of Madden. In Madden, motion shifting refers to instances in which a player's body moves or slides across the field without using proper body mechanics to perform the movement. The player will appear for a brief moment as if he is sliding on ice or levitating, and may move across the field without moving his feet, may turn in place, or may perform some other impossible feat of mobility. Warping is used almost interchangeably with motion shift, and it specifically refers to instances in which a player is motion shifted in order to interact with another player or the ball. This may include a receiver's position being adjusted in mid-air so that he lines up with the football to make a catch, a blocker sliding laterally across the field for a few feet in order to engage with a defender, or a tackler sliding several feet in order to line up a tackle animation. In these cases, the players were not in the proper position to make the plays that the game wants them to make, so it shifts their position in order to line up the animations. Force fields are the opposite of warping. In this case, a player, usually the ball carrier, though sometimes also a receiver or a defender, will stop in place or slow down for a moment in order to let another player, or the ball, catch up to him. This usually takes the form of a runner stopping or slowing so that a pursuing defender can catch up to him for the tackle. Or it may be a receiver or defender having their momentum slowed in order to line them up for a catch animation. Admittedly, I don't see these instances happening as often as I used to, so I probably am not going to have any footage of them to show you. Phasing or clipping are also used interchangeably and refer to instances in which players' physical bodies or appendages occupy the same space at the same time. Clipping is a general video game term for when this happens, and it's a very common visual bug in almost all games. The most common cause of phasing, and the most egregious example of it, is when a defender or receiver reaches his arms through the body of the other player in order to make a catch, a swat, or an interception. More benign examples include things like arms, legs, or heads clipping through each other in blocking or tackling animations, and quite frankly, those aren't really a big deal. I typically don't throw hissy fits when those sorts of things happen. Admittedly, tackle shifting has become much less prevalent in recent years. It was probably the worst in Madden 10, 11, and 12 while they were using the ProTac system. However, slight shifts do still crop up from time to time. Instead of shifting, the biggest problem with the tackling engine recently has been with the contradiction between the physics system and the use of motion-captured canned animations. Specific animations will often completely disable the game's physics for a moment, such that the momentum or inertia of a player are not conserved, and players just don't feel like they have any weight. Tackle animations may cancel out a player's momentum, or they may grant extra momentum, or they may send the player flying up into the air, or essentially allow him to hover off the surface of the ground for a moment while the animation completes, or while the game cycles from one animation into another, because it doesn't always have the smoothest of transitions. Animations also take control away from the user and prevent other players on the field from interacting with the player or players who are locked in animations. This happens commonly in tackles and also in receiver/defensive back interactions. A tackler might hit a runner and stand him up, and then other players on the defense might just stand there and stare as the tackle animation completes, completely unable to actually do anything about it. In some instances, they might not even be able to interact while the runner breaks the tackle. In other cases, the defenders will just throw themselves at the tackle animation and just kind of like tumbleweed around it. While many Madden players dismiss such problems as simple bugs or glitches, other more critical members of the community have suspected for years that these faux pas are indicative of the game cheating in order to make predetermined scripted outcomes occur. In fact, the notes released for the August 5th patch have provided some validation to those who suspected that the game scripts the outcome of plays. The note says that early block sheds had been tuned down on all Madden difficulty in order to bring the yards per carry up to their target range. The implication here is that the game uses a rubber band mechanic that allows defenders to break free of blocks early if yards per carry starts to exceed an arbitrarily determined threshold that Tiburon has set. That is, the game allows the CPU-controlled defenders to exceed their own ratings in spite of the ratings of the offensive blocker in order to artificially maintain the yards per carry value that Tiburon has defined. So if you grind at the defense with a successful running attack in the first half of the game, conventional football wisdom would say that the defense should get tired and worn down, and running should be even more successful in the second half, unless the defense makes some kind of scheme adjustment, such as putting more men in the box to defend the run. This will come, however, at the cost of leaving themselves more vulnerable to the pass and play action. Instead, Madden will, in complete contrast to conventional football wisdom, allow the defense to cheat in order to hold your running back in check and keep your yards per carry low.
And possession will switch hands, 1st and 10. Jordan Howard and the rest of the offense heading back out there. And we have seen a decline in the numbers. Where does the fault lie? Just him? Maybe the guys up front? Combination?
It stands to reason that the scripting works the other way around too. If you hold the opponent's running game in check early, then the CPU will force your players to play worse later in the game to allow the opposing running back to break big runs to bring their yards per carry up into the expected range. I don't know what else to call this other than cheating, and this is why I don't play the game on all Madden difficulty. I want to take a moment here to emphasize that I'm not complaining because the game is too hard. I'm complaining that the game is unrealistic and unrepresentative of actual football. I get just as frustrated when the CPU cheats to let me win, and I've been known to throw my controller to the ground and turn the game off because the CPU just gives me free plays that I didn't deserve. I don't want the CPU to cheat to hold me down, but I also don't want the CPU to cheat to prop me up. I want my victories to be earned. Yes, I rage quit because I'm winning too hard. The problem here is that, as far as EA is concerned, the shifting and the phasing might not even be a problem. They might be features. Even if that is the case, keeping these in the game only flies in the face of other features that the developers try to implement. What is the point of having features like leading the receiver, or throwing low or throwing high, if the defenders can continue to shift to make interceptions or swats, or if they can literally phase their arms through the receiver's body in order to make an interception or a swat? It doesn't matter where I throw the ball if the physical bodies of the receiver and cover man are not respected, and if the defender can break the laws of physics to make plays on the ball that they should not be physically capable of making. Similarly, the shifting and warping that occurs in order to line players up for tackle animations is completely antithetical to the intent of the locomotion system that's used for running, whether they be in the form of true step or real player motion or whatever EA chooses to call it when they sell it to us again in a few years. If the tackler can just magnetically snap to my runner to make a tackle, then what is the point of including locomotion features that allow me to make precision cuts, evasive moves, and changes in direction? What is the point of calculating every step that a player takes if a diving tackle can trip you up regardless of the position of the runner's feet? Or worse yet, if the game changes the animation to move the player's feet in order to line up with the tackle? What is the point of being able to get skinny or push the pile to get through holes in the line if adjacent defenders can just shift out of their blocking animations and warp to my runner in the hole? And what is the point of giving defenders the ability to make reach tackles if they can just shift and warp out of the blocks to make the tackles anyway? If the shifting and phasing and warping and clipping and all that are just bugs, then they are bugs that interfere with the successful implementation of other features that are put into the game. EA should be devoting extensive resources to fixing them, and if EA isn't committing those resources to Tiburon to fix these problems, then EA is just being lazy and short-sighted and is either unable or unwilling to fix mechanics that are not working as intended. If, on the other hand, shifting and phasing are actually deliberate functions of the game's difficulty or slider settings or whatever, then Tiburon is knowingly and deliberately sabotaging the features that they are putting into their own game. In that case, EA is fraudulently advertising the product when they tell us that these new games will, quote, give the user unprecedented control, unquote, or whatever bollocks they put on the back of the box and on the promotional posters at GameStop and on the TV spots that interrupt actual NFL football games, because they know that they programmed the game to turn that control off whenever the game scripting deems that the user or CPU isn't going to be allowed to do something. Remember a couple years ago when Tiburon added a bunch more strip sack and throw out of sack animations, and the community complained that there were too many strip sacks?
Garoppolo. He's got time. Nowhere to go here. He lost the football.
EA basically had to tune strip sacks down with a series of mid-year patches to the point that the mechanic was barely even relevant to the game anymore. Well, that strip sack feature was actually very realistic, at least I thought so, and I thought it worked very well. The problem was that the rest of the game didn't work very well around that feature. For one thing, the problem was that the users and the CPU were holding on to the ball too long instead of checking down. It was also compounded by the fact that offensive play calls designed to counter blitzes and pressure, such as screens and draws, have reliably not worked in Madden for years, and often fail harder when the defense actually does blitz because the offensive line does not block the play the way that they are supposed to. The bigger problem was that the rest of the game wasn't modified around that strip sack mechanic. Blocking engagement was, and still is, too binary, leading to defenders, especially interior rushers, releasing too easily and getting clean shots at the QB without the QB having a chance to really feel the pocket collapsing and appropriately react to the pressure. Then the following year, EA added the reach tackles, which helped with that problem, but EA didn't bother to retune the strip sack or throw out of sack to accommodate that. So now we have virtually no strip sack or lame duck passes, even in situations where we should see them. QBs just tuck the ball and take the sack, or the ball goes straight into the ground for an incompletion. And seriously, how many halftime shows have come and gone over the past 10 to 15 years? Remember the Extra Point halftime show? How many of those have been half implemented, stagnated for 2 or 3 years, only to be completely removed or replaced? Same goes for pregame presentation, and they still haven't done jack squat with the postgame.
Brandon Jacobs has rushed for over 100 yards. Taking a look at the stats from your game now, Miami racked up over 300 yards in the first half. White has rushed for over 75 yards. Miami is on top, 13-7. Top plays from the first half, here you go.
about to begin. Enjoy the rest of the game.
Welcome back to Miami.
Giants are up in this one, which is brought to you by Verizon. We're back here now in this one where the Giants lead by 3. Let's check in on the sidelines. Danielle Bellini is there.
Guys, I spoke with Coach Coughlin during halftime. Not much scoring here, so obviously Coach talks about wanting to move the ball specifically through the air. He feels like there are opportunities for big plays on the field, so he just wants to see his guys take advantage of them. Back to you.
Danielle, thank you very much. Now we'll go to the field.
So we are at halftime here on a Monday night, as we'll send you down to Orlando, where Larry Ridley has our EA Sports halftime report. Larry?
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Charles. And welcome to our EA halftime report. I'm Larry Ridley. The Bears right now are doing a good job protecting their house. The Eagles know it's always hard to come in and get a win on the road, but they're not out of this one yet. So let's take a look at the highlights from the first half. Midway through the first, the quick pass and completion is made, and he'll end up picking up 23 yards on the play. The offense would later throw a pick to end the drive. Eagles with the ball late in the half. They're going to come away with another sack. This ends up as a huge loss in yardage. Still late stages of the second. Here we get a quick pass and completion, and after the short pass, he'll score. They're now on top by 4. So that's it for us. We'll go back now under the lights for the second half of this Monday night matchup.
There's a new halftime show this year too, and it's lame, and it's completely skipped over during Play Now in exhibition games and in franchise preseason games, because apparently preseason isn't important enough to tell you what's going on around the league.
Okay, Brandon, thanks very much. Welcome in, everyone, to our EA Sports halftime report. Let's get you caught up on what's going on around the NFL. We'll get started up at Lincoln Financial Field in Philly, where it was the visiting Falcons who were able to come away with the victory. The Falcons start the campaign 1-0 with a road victory. From there, let's get down to Baltimore to check in on the Ravens at home at M&T Bank Stadium. And they were winners in their ball game over the visiting Buffalo Bills. The Ravens with a strong performance as they get the win at home in the opener. And finally on Monday night, a doubleheader to start the new year. The Jets and Lions in Matt Patricia's debut, followed by Rams Raiders in the return of John Gruden to Oakland. Meanwhile, in our game, it's been a back-and-forth first half. Who can put it together in the second half? For the answer, we turn it back over to our broadcast team of Brandon Godden and Charles Davis.
All right, Coach, thank you, and we welcome everyone back for quarter number 3.
In addition to the NFL license, EA also has, or at least has had at some point, the ESPN and NFL Network licenses. Not to mention a crap ton of money to throw around, thanks in part to all you people throwing money away in Ultimate Team. So what, EA can't bring in Chris Berman to do a fastest 3 minutes in sports highlight reel? Oh, what, would that be too close to NFL 2K5 and can't have that?
All right, Dan, we'll get back to you in a bit. But welcome, everybody, to the ESPN Halftime Show. I'm Chris Berman. Look at our halftime stats here, and boy, look at the difference in passing yards. The Chargers should be way ahead on the scoreboard, but somehow they've let their opponent hang with them. Let's see if they can change things in the second half. Let's get started in this one early in the first quarter. Matthews would find some running room on this one. Then it was off to the races. A 49-yard touchdown for the Chargers. The Chargers strike first and go up by 7. Chargers midway through the first, the ball at their own 8-yard line. Phillip Rivers would drop back and deliver a strike on this one. Chargers towards the end of the first quarter, Bolts up by 7. Matthews bounces this one to the outside, and he's going to get some room to maneuver out there. The Chiefs later in the second, number 7, would find his target on this one. A 22-yard play that set up a Chief field goal, but they couldn't connect. Chiefs back 7-0. Thomas Jones got the carry as they pounded at him on the ground, and he made the most of it. A 1-yard touchdown for the Chiefs. The Chiefs even the score 7-all. The Bolts answering right back. The Chargers already inside field goal range. Phillip Rivers would drop back and put one right on the money. A 4-yard touchdown for the Chargers. The Chiefs late into the second quarter. Chiefs behind by 6. Green was in the right place at the right time, as his interception was a possible momentum shifter. Chargers still late in the half. Phillip Rivers connected with his man on this one. And that's where we'll leave this one. Chiefs are down, but still in it, 13-7.
Whatever happened to all the ESPN and NFL Films music tracks? Or what about licensing a version of Hank Williams Jr.'s Are You Ready for Some Football for Monday night games?
Jordan, taking over Chicago. It's the coach. This is the 2018 regular season on EA Sports. Coming up, running back Jordan Howard, fresh off 100 yards a week ago. Coming up, we'll see the visiting Seattle Seahawks taking on the Chicago Bears. With that, we'll get out to Matt Nagy's home opener as coach of the Bears as we get to Soldier Field with Brandon Gaudin and Charles Davis.
ESPN welcomes you to the following presentation of the National Football League.
The spotlight's on, time to stake your claim for Monday Night Football's Hall of Fame. The Seahawks are out to show no pity when they meet the Bears in the Windy City. Are you ready for some football? A Monday night party. Stay the set. Let's get it kick-started. Yeah. Get your game face on. Crowd's getting psyched. All my riding friends are here on Monday night.
Way back in 1924, but renovated in 2002. There's a look inside venerable Soldier Field in Chicago. Just a short time ago, this crowd loud enough to shake the foundations of this nearly century-old building. They are ready for football indeed in Chicago as their guys get set to do battle with Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. With Charles Davis, I'm Brandon Gaudin. And Charles, you look at this Bears team entering play. They come in off a loss in the opener last week. That one was on the road. Now they get their first taste here of home cooking.
Or what about doing something functional, like transitioning some of the pregame and postgame presentation into the loading screens to save us some time? They actually did a little bit of that this year in showing like matchups and stats and stuff like that during the load screens. So that's actually a good start. Keep doing that. Build on that. But anyway, if they were neglecting presentation to improve the game's physics, AI, and franchise mode, then I'd be happy as a clam. But they're not doing that either. EA has the money and the resources to do these things. If they wanted to invest the time and resources to make a good game, they absolutely could. Before the series was put on an indefinite hiatus, the optimist in me prefers to think of it as a hiatus rather than a cancellation, the NCAA football games that were also made by EA were making pretty solid strides in the presentation department. They had full ESPN integration that used graphics and overlays that were pulled straight out of Saturday television broadcasts. Not only that, but the commentators actually would analyze how the game had played and even how the teams might adjust in the second half. Something that could actually be a useful tool for a user looking to change up your own strategy in the second half.
For the EA Sports NCAA Football 14 halftime show presented by Nissan. Innovation that excites. Reese Davis and David Pollack here completely locked in on that first half.
These two defenses so far, they've been everything they've been advertised to be. They've stopped the run, they've limited the passing game, they apply pressure at the right time. It's going to be hard to find holes to move the ball at all in the second half.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really bad offense, and sometimes you can also look at those holes and they come open, and all of a sudden they close really fast. And that's what you're seeing. A lot of guys that are really athletic, really fast. They know where to be. A lot of guys that you'll be seeing playing on Sundays. I mean, it's just a lot of talent to overcome, and you got to be in the right position. But then you got to beat those great players that are also in the right position. So I expect more of the same, but, you know, which team can break through it and make a huge play to take the other one, you know, off guard a little bit and make that big play.
That'll do it here in the studio at halftime. We'll try to see if Pollock can bring a little energy in the second half. Got a lot of games to watch, including yours. Brad and Kirk ready for the second half.
Turning our attention now to the newest Madden title, Madden 19, at the time that this video is being made, we now have the scheme fits mechanic and the player archetypes. These features don't really interact with the other systems much, if at all. Scheme fits only provide experience boosts to players who fit your scheme. It doesn't provide attribute or performance boosts in the way that the weekly training drills do. Heck, the scheme you select doesn't even affect your playbook or play calling. You can choose to run a fast-paced spread offense scheme, but then select a power running or West Coast playbook, and it won't affect the on-field performance of your team at all. Not only that, but Tiburon also failed to update other elements of the game that relate to and reference the schemes and player archetypes. For example, the depth chart now includes specialist positions such as slot receiver, slot cornerback, power halfback, rush defensive ends, and so forth. But the depth chart doesn't bother to tell you which archetypes each player fits under, or whether that player is a scheme fit at all. So if your slot receiver goes down with an injury in the middle of a game, and you go into your depth chart to replace him, the game doesn't even bother to tell you which of your other receivers have the slot archetype. Same goes for wanting to decide which of your defensive ends to put into the alternate rush positions. Are these features deliberately designed to not interact with the other game systems? Does Tiburon intend to make all these new features modular so that they can be plugged in and pulled out? Kind of like the way that they just pulled out the targeted passing mechanic from last year's game? Well, that's it for now. Part 2 will be coming up soon, which will focus more on the features that have been removed from the game, features that probably should be removed from the game, and some features which Tiburon has never really bothered to implement to their full potential. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. This is actually my first attempt at any sort of long-form video analysis like this. So it's bound to be very rough around the edges. I'm hoping that I'll get better as I do more of these, and I would like to do more of these. If you really enjoyed this video, then I invite you to check out my blog. It's at www.megabearsfan.net. It includes reviews of Madden, as well as some suggestion and idea topics that I've had for improving the game over the years, as well as reviews of other games, analysis of games, strategy guides, movie reviews, my thoughts on actual football. So yeah, please check it out. And if you really, really like the video, or you like the blog, or both, please feel free to become a patron on my Patreon account, the money from which will go towards maintaining the megabearsfan.net blog and domain. I'm also considering doing some kind of charity or nonprofit matching incentive so that when I hit certain goals, I'll make some matching donation to a charity or nonprofit. The specific details are yet to be determined, but there'll be more info on that on the Patreon page as I make any final decisions. So thanks again for listening, and I hope you're enjoying Madden, and I hope the game gets better.